Well, okay. Welcome to our vast audience and our routine players here. Well, let's have some fun. Let's have a planning commission meeting. First, we'll take roll. We'll call to order and do the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll face the flag and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Chair Wolf.
Here.
Vice Chair List.
Here.
Member Friend.
Yes.
Member Roby.
Here.
Member Lowry.
Here.
Next, we move to the item number 1, the consent calendar. Any discussion?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Signify approval of the consent calendar by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. So that moves us down to item 3, items of interest to the public. Regarding items not on tonight's agenda, it doesn't look like we have any non-combatants here tonight. So we'll go ahead and move on to, were there any written communications for us tonight?
No, there were not.
Thank you. So we'll move on to public hearing for 126 Fording Road. The following request was submitted for an existing auto sales and service use to establish and use a new pole sign. And okay, I'll just stop there. So do we have a staff report on this item?
Yeah, I can briefly go over this project, and the project site should be very familiar with the commission. Back in February, you considered a master sign plan amendment for the same location involving wall signage, ground signs, and there was a request also at that meeting to consider a new pole sign, and it was after discussion by the commission with the applicant and the representatives, the applicant came back. Well, you put aside action on that use permit. The applicant mentioned to you and their agent about wanting to perhaps swap out or take out the time and temp pole sign that's there now. And that's what the applicant and their representative, Mr. Schneider, is here tonight to convey to you. They do indeed intend to swap out the existing use permit for the time and temp pole sign and place the proposed pole sign, which you did receive elevations in your packet, as well as they are the same elevation from back in February. It's a 20-foot tall freestanding pole sign. There are 4 badges that will represent each of the 4 car makes that are sold on the site. The signs are halo lit, and the approximate square footage of that new sign is 53.5 square feet. It's slightly more, about 14 square feet more than the pole sign that's to be removed. But overall, the aggregate, if you count the square foot total from February with the proposed signage tonight, the aggregate sign area for the master sign plan would be roughly 356.5 square feet. Since this does involve a use permit for a pole sign and the removal of a pole sign, that's why all of these entitlements are before you tonight. One is to get approval for the new pole sign, the vacation and termination of the old pole sign from 2010, and a minor amendment to the master sign package to add this new pole sign and its square footage to the overall total I just described to you. Staff's prepared some findings of fact for you to consider tonight. Staff believes all these findings can be made based on the circumstances of the site as evidenced in the staff report and from what you'll hear from Mr. Schneider this evening. So staff recommends approval conditionally for the requests, making the findings on page 4 of the staff's report, and then conditionally approve the request with the conditions that start on page 5 of and continue on to page 6 of the staff report. That really concludes my report, unless you've got questions of me. I want to also mention that Mr. Dennis Schneider of Western Sign Company is in the audience this evening.
I have one. Perhaps we should have brought this to your attention earlier, but we're all kind of like looking for the staff report. Was that just unintentionally omitted from the? Yeah, I discovered it about 2 hours ago. As I was standing over there in the dirt, going, "Well, where's the?" So I think it got omitted.
Yeah, I can't explain why it wasn't, but if did all of you not get one, or just?
I don't have one either. No, I mean, I've got the drawings and so forth.
Yeah. I assumed there was some master plan at work.
Okay. Well, then,
But
without anything else on the agenda, I suppose you could take a recess to read the staff report if you wish. And then I could follow up with a question and answer period afterward. I apologize for that not being in your packet, but that's where we are. Or the other option would be to continue this to the next meeting.
I yield, Mr. Roby.
How far off or what is differing in this staff report overall than the previous one from February?
It's the main difference is the location of where this pole sign is going to be located. If you remember from February, the new pole sign was to be located at approximately the intersection at the corner of where Brew goes up the hill and intersects with Forney Road. The time and temp pole sign is further to the east, but also along Forney Road. And you did mention you did receive the site plan and the graphics. So at least at least you can look at the sign. It is exactly the same pole sign, the same square footage from February. But once again, the only difference in this case is the location.
I presume that staff was going, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and staff report wasn't essential. Mr. Chairman, I would just like to make a suggestion, if it's within our realm, and staff can correct me, to the extent that we only have the representative of the applicant here this evening, that we can just kind of have a discussion, as opposed to maybe being too incredibly formal. That's just my suggestion. So, as opposed to opening a public hearing and close public hearing, because there may be questions we want to have back and forth, and just to save all of that parliamentary nonsense.
yeah, I would just suggest let's just open the public hearing and then we'll hear from the applicant and kind of see where everybody is. But I tend to agree with you. It's easy enough. This is only like our third or fourth review on this one, so. Hearing no objections to that, first we'd like to open the public hearing then and hear from the applicant. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, gentlemen. How are you? This is dovetailing with the sign package that goes on the building that we discussed in February that was approved. This is the same pole sign, and if you look at your documents, we're actually taking down the old Ford sign, which is what that was. It has Thompson on the top. That's going to be plucked, and apparently the sign that we will be getting, they're looking to dovetail the sign or to manufacture it so it will go right on that same footing. In fact, we're just now checking the bolt pattern for the manufacturer to make sure that we can get things lined up so that we can pretty much just unbolt one and bolt the other one on. It's approximately the same height. Obviously, the configuration is a little bit different, but it makes a lot more sense on the site when you're there visiting the site to know that that in fact is your Dodge Chrysler dealership to the right. It's pretty simple for us.
Okay, anybody have any questions, comments?
Yeah, I'll yield.
On the master sign plan application, it says that the new sign, the height above the grade is 20 foot, and the existing sign to be removed, the height on the grade is 36 foot 8 inches.
Yeah, I haven't measured, that was what was approved. We went back and looked at, and we did not build that sign. We looked at the prior applications, and that's what it says. So if we take that as it was, then we're actually reducing it. As I drove by, in fact, I was there today picking up some parts, and it doesn't look like it's 36 feet tall. It may well be. I have not measured it. So at the very least, it'll be the same height, but I'm assuming it's going to be 15 feet less based on the measurements.
I'm just wondering if the new sign measured to the bottom of the sign and the old sign measured to the top of the sign.
I think you can see that.
Well,
here.
Yeah, so, no, it is to the top on the new sign.
yeah, when you, I'm not sure how much
Yeah,
detail
it
you have in
includes
your
the pedestal.
plans.
Yeah.
Have you got a set of plans like that there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you-
this drawing is dimensioned also, so it's
Okay,
pretty
yeah,
straightforward.
then that's 20 feet. I have actually more detailed drawings here.
Yeah.
That shows to the top of the new sign 20 feet.
and so the top of the old sign is at 36, so we've come down 16 feet on the height of the sign.
Yeah, apparently,
Wow, okay.
it's good. That's usually not an effort for us to have to get something smaller and shorter in. That's usually easier for us.
If it would help the commission this evening, I can, since you don't have the staff report in front of you, that is one of the findings staff has made, is that the applicant's request with the new pole sign is substantially less than the sign that is of record as we know it today. That's one of the findings. The other mandatory finding that needs to be made, well, actually, there are two more. One is the setback from the height of the sign to the property boundary. In this case, the property boundary out along Forney Road. The staff report describes the issue of the pole sign is 20 feet tall, as we just heard and read and seen in the exhibits. The pole sign, as you see on the graphic, is located approximately 10 feet from the back of the right-of-way along the street. And that same issue, and maybe Commissioner Friend might remember that discussion back in 2010 when the time and temp went up, that to put it back 20 feet, which was what the code would require, 1 foot for every foot of height of a pole sign. That's what the code states. But in this case, that applicant can request a deviation from that through the master sign process. In this case, if it were to go back 20 feet, then the sign would be located kind of in the middle of the parking lot. And that might make it more difficult for this particular user and tenant for their inventory, the circulation of traffic on the site. And so the proposed request tonight is really no different than the issue that this commission and body dealt with back in 2010. The other mandatory finding required of you is to make a determination that the request and the use on the site, a pole sign has to cater for a use that excuse me, let me rephrase that. A pole sign is permitted for a use that caters to the highway traveling public. I think that this particular use could certainly meet that, and certainly does meet that intent. A car dealership certainly is a use that the highway traveling public would want to know and locate should they want to buy a new car or have their car serviced, et cetera. So with that, I'll turn back over to your discussion with the applicant.
Any questions? Comments?
Commissioner Lowry, do you have a question? Because I'll yield, sir.
No, John took care of my questions for me. Thank you.
So, I don't know how anyone else on the commission feels. Mr. Schneider, these are always probably the least satisfying projects that come to me personally as a commissioner. Sure. These formula, it's this way. So I need to know, the visual interest in the sign, I find to be incredibly lacking personally, and I'll just say that. And I would like to know, and I guess I'll direct this at staff as well, is there in writing something specific from the automotive group that says this sign has to look like this and absolutely may not have any particular visual interest for the community in which it's placed? Because if there is, then this certainly meets that requirement. And I guess I'm asking in not a very nice way, and I apologize in advance, isn't there a way to achieve this, what the dealership needs, what the manufacturers needs, and what the community needs, with some alternative design? I'm far less concerned about the height of I actually, as much as I didn't really care for the Toyota and the Time Temp sign, because again, they were given to us, I find those to be much more attractive than what this is. This is kind of striking me like 70 strip mall. So I apologize, but what latitude do we have with this? How bound are we, and are there actual documents that say, hey, it must look exactly like this, or you just can't do it? That's where I'm at. My inclination would be to vote no, just on the absence of information that suggests that we're bound to this. So, and I'm not placing blame on anybody. I feel like we're in the dark in terms of what has to be and what the options could be.
If I can chime in, I kind of felt the same way, but I've, in my different tenures on the Planning Commission, I've seen these kind of formula solutions, and I've kind of had the same thought where it's just maybe you could share with us a little bit, corporate headquarters somewhere, as we've been led to believe, says it's this way or the highway, no pun intended. Is that kind of the way it really works?
Well, yeah, we're going to be, in this case, the sign installers. We're not designing any of this. We can design some pretty nice signs. I don't mind saying that. And
of course.
And have. And so what we receive is an instruction packet, just as you see it. There's going to be this signage, this size, including Toyota, which, and it's just when you look at the Toyota dealership, we put that up as well, and that is also a package, and that's Toyota's package, and this is Chrysler's package. In fact, as I've done my permitting travels, and I do permits all over the state, I look at these things. I look at all the signage, and I recognize now for myself, hey, there's a Chrysler dealership, because I've been looking at this thing for the past 6 months or more, and so I recognize that as Chrysler's new package, and they all look the same. Some are smaller to accommodate a building, but they all have the same signage. In fact, when you go to like Lodi, it's CDJR. That's all they say is CDJR, and I know who that is. That's Chrysler Deep. And you recognize who that is, and it's not very fancy.
So may I, if I could pursue that, and maybe something for us to consider in the future when he's come to us, is ask staff to give us some examples in the greater Sacramento region, since we're in the same area as Arden Arcade. Right. Are you telling me that this it looks to me like the mailbox flag up for mail is in symbol, that what I'm talking, the shape. Are you suggesting that this shape is universal? This is the chevron in and of itself. This could not be, for example, within 2 poles, or couldn't be decorated. That it has to be exactly this flaggy shape, or because that's where I'm getting at. And part of me is saying that we really need to have the designer here, not the installer, as you indicated you are. And I'm sorry that you're caught in the middle, but we need the design people here, and we need to see the specifics as well. It has to have either exactly this or what the elements are, to give us some opportunity to still maintain the relationship to the community, which I don't think is unreasonable for us. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. I'd be happy to continue it if we could have that information come back to us, the designer, to see the specific requirements. So we could make a decision based upon some data.
Yeah, I have no idea if you could get the designer here or not. I believe that's all back east.
Maybe
and it's corporate wide, and that's how all these things are. In fact, so much so that I spoke with the local project manager who was in charge of not just this one, but several in the West. And the minute I told him that it was a Ford sign, he goes, "Oh, we got Ford bolts. We'll just bolt the new one onto Ford." So apparently, the Ford dealerships that they plan, these signs will go on. And it is what it is, and not up to me to say whether it's attractive or not. As a package, when you look at one of the dealerships, all put together, it works. That's just to me. And like I said, I'm not designing them. We're not making a nickel on designing these things. We are only the installers. And this is the corporate package, and this is the way it came to us. And whether it comes this way to everybody, I'm going to assume something very, very close to this does, at least based on what I've seen in the countryside.
If I may, if I drive into San Diego and I'm looking for a McDonald's, I'm going to look for a McDonald's sign. If I'm in Houston, Texas, and looking for a McDonald's, I'm going to look for a McDonald's sign.
Right.
They're universal wherever they are, and the same thing we're talking about here. If you drive around, and I'm looking at the date when this drawing was completed, which was 2010. Right. So they've been using this sign for the last 6 years, at least. And so it's their their corporate logo that they're putting up there. And so, yeah, you're not going to get a whole lot of change out of them, no matter where, wherever you are. They want somebody to be able to drive down the freeway and recognize that it's a Jeep, Chrysler, Dodge dealership by the shape of the sign and the color of the sign and the lettering on the sign. So
Well,
that's
I
what
will,
we're up against.
But I understand where you're saying with regards to the Chevron aspect. Over the years, this commission, however, has seen many examples, including some McDonald's in Connecticut or Vermont, that the examples were brought forth, where they still retain the Golden Arch chevron, okay, that icon. The icon is not this flag shape. The icon is Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Chrysler. Those are the icons. Those are the chevrons. And I'm merely saying that those chevrons could certainly be presented in other ways that maintain the identity without question, but also provide some visual interest. And we have had many examples come to this commission showing how corporations have done it. The Home Depot, I think, is another example. There are very few, buildings that look like that Home Depot. Apologize for the. And you can get there, Commissioner, absolutely, and it can work also with the community. And I really think it's at the design level that we don't have any information on regarding what's driving it, what are we bound to, what are the options, and I think a little pushback, and again, Mr. Schneider's caught in the middle for sure, and it's interesting, that's who they send for to deal with these things, as opposed to the actual entity that's wanting to put it in, and I think, some pushback is not necessarily inappropriate, so.
My recent recollection is that Thompson's Toyota came to the commission with a new corporate identity plan, and as they explained it to us at that hearing is that that Toyota's position was, if you want to continue to sell our brand of cars, you will remake the profile or the appearance of your dealership in this image. So, and it's also true that you could say the commission acquiesced to that or swallowed it whole, but the results of that process are now next door to where this sign is proposed to go in. I share Commissioner Friend's concern about the homogenization of this town's appearance. I'm a big fan of a book written by James Howard Gunsler called The Geography of Nowhere. But that said, I think that businesses do have some basic privilege to present their corporate identity in a way that's been harmonized corporate-wide. I looked up the Principal Group in Knoxville, Tennessee. Their business is global branding. So this isn't some sign shop down in the former Confederacy. This is a design consultancy that does this for many, like we all recall the new Pepsi cans or, some other, and all of those new global brandings. In the fullness of time, we find out whether they were wonderful ideas or not. But at some point, the order goes down from corporate that says, if you want to continue to sell and service our cars, this is what you're going to do. So I don't have to love it, but I have to understand that these are some of the financial exigencies that the dealers find themselves under. And I will say that this is a perfect example of where people can differ on the aesthetics of the thing, but the sign that's coming down, praise the four winds, I guess all I can say, because I think that's an ugly sign. So, and I'm prepared to vote anytime the rest of the commission is.
Did you guys put up that other sign, the existing one?
Sorry?
Did you put up the existing one?
No, did not.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting that, no one, like Commissioner Friend was saying, no one's questioning these logos and the value of consistency with the logos. It's just, boy, I wish we could, for lack of a better term, dress these things up. I have the advantage of being a designer, and I can't show this to anybody because that's not our job, but it took me less than a minute to come up with a solution of design that would probably pass unanimously by just using different materials, a slightly different approach to the lighting, the base of the sign. When you have a big thing, you always have to be concerned about how it meets the ground and how it terminates at the top. And you could keep all these logos and be doing exactly the right thing in terms of the marketing side from the automobile industry side, but also give the community something in return other than, if you want Dodge and Chrysler here, this is the way it has to be. So I'm wondering, do we have to change the ordinance, change some policy language, or do we have to kind of adjudicate this, at the hearing level?
I'm going to anticipate a motion as Commissioner Lowry suggested he was going to make, and so I would simply suggest to the commission that certainly if the commission were to approve this and it's a done deal, we move on, and again the precedent continues to be set. Alternatively, I think the commission is certainly within its right to say, we want more information. We want to know for sure, and we want definitive knowledge that no options, no deviations, no changes, no creativity, nothing is permitted with this. Okay? That's just part of the homework. That's just part of the due diligence. And maybe that's a different way of approaching these types of things. But it seems to me that if we can accomplish the needs of the dealership and the needs of the manufacturer as well as the needs of the community, that's a good thing. And I just think that put a little bit of pressure back on not only the dealership, it's the sign installer really is kind of outside of this, except to go back and convey, but with the dealership and maybe the regional representative for this group, and just show a little interest in the community is all I'm suggesting.
Another comment, if I may. I think also we make context arguments from one side or the other sometimes, and there's along this street there's truly a context of 150 or so years ago. There's some things that are built on the street which I'm not nuts about because they don't seem to harmonize with but it's pretty easy to detect that. But I would also say that if you drive that stretch from Missouri Flat Road outside of the city into the city limits, and as you look to your left, you see a Big Lots, a Carl's Jr.'s, the other industries there. On the south side, you see an In-N-Out, an Arco gas station, a Schlotsky's, and an Office Max, and then you continue. No one driving that stretch of highway would have the merest thought that they're driving through Solvang. What that stretch of highway is typical motoring-dominated geography of nowhere territory. And so I think, you know, if this is where we're gonna put our stake in the sand and say everything that goes in new after this is going to have to satisfy our creative and aesthetic senses, then every time something turns over, like the Carl's Jr.'s or the Denny's, then the word can go forth is that regardless of whether you're in highway commercial or whether you're up on East Broadway, if you want to change your sign, you better bring game and you better bring a large design budget. So I think to be consistent, you have to be consistent one way or the other. So again, I'm ready to vote.
Someone prepared to make a motion?
I'm not a very good motion maker, but I could my limited experience making motions, I move that we accept the staff report as written and the recommendations thereto. I move that we approve this application as described in the staff report. And I welcome amendments.
I second.
Okay, so it's been moved and second to approve the findings and the staff report and the conditions of approval included in the staff report. Is there any further discussion on the motion? I just was going to recognize myself. You know, I understand completely, and I've made the argument myself on behalf of applicants, that this issue of, you know, of contextualism and the highway commercial, the anywhere, any town, USA kind of look that we all accept. And I just wonder at some point, way back when, if some more communities had drawn a line in the sand and said, you know, we're not going to just keep the downtown nice and the rest can just go where it goes in terms of the aesthetics. It's uncomfortable to have to take this particular project and say, well, let's draw the line in the sand here. But I wonder how many communities throughout the country have actually drawn that line. And I've seen a few, as some of you know, I'm a pretty avid cross-country bicycle rider, and you see a lot when you're only going 8 miles an hour or slower. And I've seen our little freeway commercial area over there hundreds and hundreds of times. Oh, sure. I've also seen some where you could tell that the line got drawn. Somebody said, "We're, you know, sure you can have your cookie cutter," and I don't mean that as badly as it sounds, but you can have your cookie cutter design, but you got to go the extra mile. And I don't think there's anything wrong in, as a community, saying, fine, we want to make things work, we want to keep people working, we don't want to necessarily add to the cost of projects, but, you know, that's how come, because communities have not drawn that line in the sand is why freeway commercial stuff looks the way it does. And then we use sometimes poor design, not picking anybody here in this project with that comment, but we just come to accept it because it's already been accepted. If we use that same logic, we'd have 10 more of those giant in and out signs. I'm being a little facetious, but I think you got to draw the line somewhere. At least start trying to ask for kind of a higher level. Any other discussion?
I would remind the commission that the Planning Commission in either 1999 or 2000, just prior to my first term as a commissioner, did in fact deny the In-N-Out burger place the use of their Chevron Twin Palms. And those of you recall that became quite an issue when they were subsequently put in anyway. But that commission actually took a stand on something fairly significant, and they did that. With regards to the findings in the staff report, Finding B says the sign is deemed essential to the public convenience and is in harmony with the various elements and objectives of the general plan. And then one objective or one assessment is made, and so I guess I would just ask, well, how many of the objectives in the general plan is this satisfying? Were we able to find one to get the finding? Or if we look at the balance sheet, we find, yeah, well, there's quite a few that, we didn't meet. I did not do that assessment. I'll be the first one to admit, but I think that might be something that I'm going to do certainly in the future. And then further, it says in D is a finding, all signage is of quality design and is compatible and well related with the style and character of the existing improvements. I have already said that I believe I find the quality of the design to be a C. I don't think this is a high quality design. So I would tend to object to D as a finding. I'm just putting those items out there because those are some of the metrics by which this commission has to make its evaluation. I will be voting no on the motion, regrettably.
Any other discussion?
My 2 cents worth is, I travel quite extensively. I don't travel at 8 miles an hour, so maybe my powers of observation aren't quite as thorough as the chair's. I do see quite a number of nationally recognized franchises, brands that are molded to fit typically existing commercial properties, whether it's a strip mall or a general concept in a town, small town, which I travel to quite a bit. And it is usually, like I said, pre-existing. I don't think we should put the burden of drawing the line in the sand at this property. I think going forward, it would behoove us to find out what kind of leeway the designer or the installer, I'm sorry, not the designer, but the designer would have if we had them present, and make sure that those options are taken advantage of if we need to. I think overall, the reduction in height, the minimal addition of the square footage, I can live with. I am also ready to cast a vote at this time.
I just one other. This is kind of a down the road thing, but I think if the sense of the city and the citizens of the city, and their sense is that they would like the Planning Commission to implement a design aesthetic that fits a certain mold or projects a certain image. Does Placerville want to look at, when people come to Placerville to build something, should they be prepared for an Atherton or an Orinda or a Beverly Hills or a Palos Verdes Peninsula planning template? And if we think we can make that fly, if we think we can make that stick in whatever the market conditions are, then we should by all means proceed with that, creating that vision of what we all agree is harmonious and satisfactory to us. That said, I think if we're going to go down that road, we owe it to the applicants to be able to present them with a document so that they can arrive here eyes open and understand before they ever come before the Planning Commission. We, as a civil servant, I'm in the business of managing expectations. So if we want to move the window, the development, the appearance window one direction or the other, we need to provide guidance for that. That's how the world works. If you want to impose a technical standard or an aesthetic standard, a priori it has to be published. So that's all.
Thank you. We'll close the public hearing now and bring it back for action. All right, thank you. Hearing no other comments, I'll call the question, and we'll take a roll call vote.
Member Lowry,
Aye.
Vice Chair List,
Aye.
Chair Wolf,
No.
Member Roby,
Aye.
Member Friend.
Surprisingly, no.
All right, thank you. Motion carries, and we'll move on. Thank you for your patience. Good luck building your sign.
This decision's appealable, by the way. Is it? I think it's
Yeah.
appealable. Yeah.
Should they choose to, yeah. Okay, we'll move on to new business, and the big agenda item tonight on that is election of officers. So defer to the staff.
Well, the way this works, since all of you are here, we can hold this item. It does take a nomination and a second for both the office of chair and vice chair. So I guess I would open up the floor for someone to make a nomination for one or the other.
Any discussion before we proceed to nominations?
I guess there's one other thing I need to say, that the just for the record, the office runs a calendar year. It's supposedly we were supposed to do this in March, but at the March 1 is officially when the term begins. So it's March 1 to the end of February of the following year. So you serve for one calendar year.
So any action the commission takes tonight, those officers serve until March 1st of 2017.
Correct. And actually take the office next meeting.
Who has
right.
not been an officer yet?
She's vice.
Okay, so there's one. That's an obvious pick.
Yeah, you can't hide. You can't hide.
Past practice, if I can help the commission,
Of course.
has been that there's been kind of a cycle going on in my observation the last few years. And with the current chair, Chair Wolf, and Vice Chair List, in past practice, the Vice Chair List would become the chair, and the most junior member, sorry, Mr. Roby, you would likely be selected as the Vice Chair for the
Apology
next.
accepted.
I move that as a slate of officers with Commissioner List as chair and Commissioner Roby as
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I really don't want.
Call the question.
I would prefer not to serve as chair. I will serve as vice chair, but not as chair.
I would propose that Chairperson Wolf continue to serve another term in his role as chair, and that Commissioner Roby be slotted in as vice chair.
Technically, we have a motion on the table, and which was seconded.
Nobody
I'm happy to
seconded it.
withdraw my
Okay.
motion.
Nobody seconded it.
I'm for any motion that keeps me out of the chair.
There we go.
Okay, so is someone willing to, I'm willing to serve. Are you willing to serve?
I am.
Okay.
There we go.
Well, that motion didn't get a
By
second.
unanimous accolade, we can just,
You notice?
I second.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Let's take a roll call vote.
Member Lowry,
Aye.
Member List,
Aye.
Member Wolf,
Aye.
Member Roby,
Aye.
Member Friend.
without question.
And you'll know that you notice I engineered that. You never know who your friends are.
We move on to item 5.2, Annual Planning Commission Bylaws Review. This is another one of those where I believe we all have to be here to do this, and I'll defer to staff at this point.
Yeah, I bring back this every year, usually right around the time as when new members come in or on an anniversary thereof, and we're at that time. It's the spring, and this is your opportunity to look through the bylaws, make any amendments. Once again, all 5 members are here, so under the bylaws as they're currently written, you would have the authority as a group to change them, amend them. What you cannot do is delete them. You are required to have them under our code. So you can't delete all of them, but you can certainly amend them tonight if you wish.
Mr. Chairman, I'll simply make the observation that we have done revisions to the bylaws 2 or 3 times, and I would say, and I went back through them and contemplated how they're functioning and we're functioning. I think we did a pretty good job, particularly with the last revision, and did in some of the public hearing and how we're addressing things in terms of how everything is flowing. I couldn't find anything that needed to be changed. So I think they're sitting pretty tight right now. Just my observation.
I agree.
Yeah, I'd like to concur with that, and if for no other reason that these bylaws aren't even a year old. The last revision was November of 2015, and as much as I like to tinker, so I think we're fine where we're at.
Any other discussion? We don't need to move this, do we? Okay.
I'm sorry.
I have a quick question, and this I mentioned at the last meeting. Because of our responsibility to perform the duties of the suspended Historical Advisory Committee, is there an appropriate place to insert those duties in the bylaws? Is that appropriate? How can we go to make those responsibilities inclusive in the bylaws? Open-ended question.
Well, I suppose the answer would be council declared by resolution, I believe, I don't believe they abolished the Historical Advisory Committee. The word escapes me as to how they described it.
Well,
but
it actually says suspended.
Suspended, yes, that's the term. So there is a potential expectation that they may be seated at some time in the future, and to formally put the responsibilities of that into the bylaws, I don't know how Director Rivas feels about that, but I don't think it's necessary. I think the resolution adopted by council specifies that is one of your roles. Staff will certainly help facilitate that whenever a situation like that's subject to their being the Historical Advisory Committee and their responsibility. But I'll turn it over to Pierre if he's got any comments.
Well, I might be able to make your answer a little bit shorter. No offense. I mean, it is in the public record that it was suspended, and we are tasked with those. So it is a matter of if and when, then the responsibility falls on city staff, and I can live with that.
I would just make a couple of real quick comments on that. Prior to the creation of the Historic Advisory Committee, the Planning Commission did serve as the reviewing body regarding projects that found themselves within one of our historic districts. Staff will do a thorough review and analysis of any project located within an historical district, give you as much information as we can, and make recommendations on the appropriateness of the use and or the design of the project that happens to be within an historic district. So you would then just consider the information provided, the application, of course, and then staff's recommendation. So there isn't really, staff doesn't see really much there that you haven't done in the past, or at least the Planning Commission as a body hasn't done in the past, except for the Historic Advisory Committee, which much more focused on basically reviewing historic structures and providing its own recommendations on different things like that. So it's not to say that that ability doesn't still exist, probably not as in the level of detail. And maybe Mr. Painter can correct me if I'm wrong. I know one of the particular tasks was to review and maybe make recommendations on our historic structure inventory and things of that nature. We probably wouldn't do that through the commission. We'd probably have to hire a consultant to do that. But I think you should be well equipped. I think staff's well equipped to do an analysis of any project that involves historic structures and bring that to you for a decision.
My sense
I
is,
appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Sorry. My sense is as long as there's no money forthcoming from the feds or from the state, everyone would be quite happy to leave the historical commission activities to the tender mercies of the planning commission. And then once the money starts showing up, then a level of interest and parties interested there too will coalesce around the issue.
Question for staff. If there was a technical change, so for just by way of example, Article 7 procedures, item F, members must adhere to the attendance policy of the City of Placerville Commission and Board Policy Manual. If that document were to, for whatever reason, be given a different name, so then it would obviously have to be changed here. Would that type of technical change require that all 5 members be here and we have to vote on it, or is that just?
I see your question. I think if the document and the superseded version of it was in essence the same thing and just changed their name, then yeah, I think we could do that as a editorial, if that's your,
Yeah,
yeah.
All right.
If it's a substantive change where duties are changed, then yeah, we would. I don't think that would happen, but yeah, I think if it's just an editorial change, I think we can handle that here. Certainly inform you, and you would get a copy of the new document if that were to happen.
Staff would make the change.
Yeah.
It's non-substantive, doesn't change anything. It's an edit.
We can move on. Item 6.1, matters from commissioners and staff. Anything from commissioners first?
I do have a question of staff. Have we heard anything from the How or on the How situation? I believe they have a date next month. I can't recall if it's the first or the second planning commission meeting of the month, but they have to have submitted on the parking lot, if I remember correctly.
The date, specific date, I don't remember. I know it's in May.
Okay.
And no, we have not received any application from that party.
All right. May 17 kind of strikes me as in my brain too, so I know it's coming about a month away.
Yes, I believe it's May 17th.
I guess that would be the second meeting, yeah.
That's good that you remember that.
Well, the only reason I remember that is because well, no, funny you should say that. Adjournment is, the next meeting is scheduled for May 2nd. On here, it should be May 3rd, which I will not be present at, so that's what struck me.
Slacking in your first official duties, you're slacking. Yeah. Our previous discussion about the bylaws prompted a question regarding the Historic Advisory Committee. When I was on the Historic Advisory Committee, we expended a lot of time and energy discussing and considering the Downtown Historic District, and has that just kind of gone on hold? Is there still any kind of push or interest in that process?
Staff right now is concentrating on finalizing the development guide with the City Council. So when we get the development guide behind us, then we'll move forward with the proposed, or at least the recommended boundaries and creation of the historic downtown historic district.
All right. Anything else?
Yeah, I just want to report out on the planning commissioner training workshop. I was provided a scholarship for and attended this past Saturday. I mean, you know, they paid for my matriculation and travel, so I'm grateful for that. But so we covered the areas, procedural basics, commissioner conduct, the decision-making process. We had a module on the general plan. What was interesting for me is that a general plan subsumes several elements, the housing element being one, and in light of how contentious the housing element appears to be statewide, they broke that out as its own topic. So that was really worthwhile. And then we had a module, an hour-long module on the California Environmental Quality Act. on things like a fair argument. Is that the correct term? And I said it's a demanding process, and I think anybody who considers eating raw sea urchins whole as a delicacy would probably find a home in the CEQA process. That is all.
Fortunately.
Sushi.
Yes, fortunately. Any other comments on potential seafood? Any comments from staff? Any items?
Apparently no.
We want to talk more about the commissioner's comment about the food. Okay, then I will assume we have consensus to adjourn. Thank you.
I do have one thing I do want to say really quick that I had forgotten. I just wanted to let the commission know that we did receive an application for the Hampton Inn Hotel.
All right.
So there's a 30-day period that staff will review the application for completeness, but just give you a heads up, that will be coming before you, hopefully sometime very
Also
soon.
like getting the stuff earlier, that is helpful, despite the fact
Very
you
welcome.
failed to observe the absence of the staff report.